I owe you an apology. As a doctor, I need to say this openly because the medical community has failed you on something critical. For years, we told you to worry about your blood sugar only if you were diabetic. We told you that the occasional spike after a big meal was harmless, that your body would just handle it. But here is what we did not tell you. Every single time your blood sugar spikes sharply, your heart pays a price. Not someday, not decades from now. Right now, in real time, your blood vessels stiffen, your arteries become inflamed, and the delicate inner lining of your cardiovascular system takes damage that accumulates silently until the day it is no longer silent. A study published in the European Heart Journal in 2019 involving over 15,000 participants across multiple countries found that people with frequent glucose spikes after meals had a significantly higher risk of cardiovascular events, even when their average blood sugar levels appeared perfectly normal on standard tests. Let me repeat that because it changes everything. Your fasting glucose can look perfect, your A1C can be in range, and your heart can still be suffering because of what happens in the 2 hours after you eat. This is the conversation your doctor probably never had with you, and today I am going to walk you through exactly what is happening inside your body every time your blood sugar surges, why your heart is the first organ to feel it, and the specific steps you can take starting today to protect yourself. Before I go any further, I want to ask you something personal. When was the last time you felt your heart race or pound after a heavy meal? Maybe after a plate of pasta, a bowl of white rice, or even something you thought was healthy like a fruit smoothie or a granola bar. I want you to type that food in the comments right now. Just name the one meal that makes you feel the heaviest or the most sluggish afterward, because I guarantee you that meal is doing more to your heart than you realize. And if this is the first time someone is explaining this connection to you, I need you to do something for me. Subscribe to this channel right now. Not because I want numbers, but because I am building a space where you get the truth about your health before it becomes an emergency. The kind of information that should come from your doctor, but rarely does because the system is not designed to prevent disease. It is designed to manage it after it is already too late. Stay here with me. This information could genuinely change the trajectory of your health. Now, let me explain what actually happens inside your cardiovascular system when your blood sugar spikes, because once you see this mechanism clearly, you will never look at a plate of food the same way again. When you eat something that causes a rapid rise in blood glucose, your pancreas responds by releasing a large burst of insulin. That part most people understand. But what most people do not understand is what that sudden flood of glucose does to the walls of your blood vessels before insulin even has a chance to bring things back down. Your blood vessels are lined with a single layer of incredibly delicate cells called the endothelium. Think of the endothelium as the inner skin of your arteries. It is responsible for keeping blood flowing smoothly, for signaling your vessels to relax and expand when needed, and for preventing dangerous clots from forming. When glucose levels spike rapidly, this layer of cells comes under direct chemical assault. The excess glucose triggers a process called oxidative stress, which is essentially a storm of unstable molecules called free radicals that rip through cell membranes and damage the endothelial lining. This is not theoretical. A landmark study published in the journal Diabetes Care in 2006 demonstrated that even a single high glucose spike in healthy, non-diabetic individuals caused measurable impairment of endothelial function within just 60 minutes. The researchers used a technique called flow-mediated dilation to measure how well the brachial artery could relax and expand, and they found that after a glucose spike, the artery lost a significant portion of its ability to dilate properly. In simple terms, your blood vessels become stiffer and less responsive every single time your blood sugar surges. Now imagine that happening 2 or 3 times a day, every day, for years. That is the reality for most people eating a modern diet, and they have no idea it is happening because they feel fine. Until they do not. But oxidative stress is only the beginning. The second thing that happens during a blood sugar spike is something even more dangerous in the long run, and that is inflammation. When excess glucose floods the bloodstream, it triggers the activation of a molecule called NFKB, which is essentially the master switch for inflammation in your body. Once NFKB is activated, it sets off a cascade of inflammatory signals that attract white blood cells to the walls of your arteries. These white blood cells begin to burrow into the endothelium, and over time, they form the foundation of what becomes arterial plaque. This is literally how atherosclerosis begins. Not from cholesterol floating in your blood, but from inflammation damaging the vessel wall and creating a place for cholesterol to accumulate. A study published in the Journal of the American College of Cardiology in 2018 analyzed data from over 8,000 patients and found that postprandial glucose variability, which means how much your blood sugar swings up and down after meals, was a stronger predictor of heart attack risk than fasting glucose or even LDL cholesterol. That finding shook the cardiology world because it means we have been measuring the wrong thing for decades. We have been obsessing over what your blood sugar looks like first thing in the morning, when the real danger is what it does in the hours after every single meal. I need you to listen to this message very carefully, because what I'm about to reveal could protect your health and perhaps even save your life. For a long time, I didn't realize the danger that excess blood sugar represented. I discovered that high glucose levels can increase the risk of heart attack, stroke, vision loss, and even amputations. The scariest thing is that type 2 diabetes often acts silently. Many people believe everything is fine when in fact their bodies are already suffering serious damage. And if your blood sugar is high right now, you may be at much greater risk than you imagine. But then I discovered a completely natural method that helped me understand how to balance my blood sugar levels and regain my quality of life. Thousands of people are also discovering this simple method and learning how to naturally reduce excess sugar and avoid the dangers of type 2 diabetes. And there's something important you need to know. All this information is compiled in a special video that we don't know how long will be available. If you want to discover what I discovered and learn a natural way to help control your blood sugar levels, click the link in the first pinned comment now and watch the video before it's taken down. Let me walk you through 7 specific ways these blood sugar spikes are silently damaging your heart right now, because knowledge is the first step toward protection, and I want you to understand exactly what you are fighting against. Number 1 is endothelial dysfunction, which I already touched on but deserves deeper attention because it is the root of almost every cardiovascular disease. Every time glucose spikes, nitric oxide production in your blood vessels drops. Nitric oxide is the molecule your body uses to keep arteries relaxed, flexible, and open. Without adequate nitric oxide, your blood vessels constrict, blood pressure rises, and the heart has to work harder to push blood through a system that is essentially tightening around it. Over time, this leads to chronic hypertension that seems to come from nowhere. I had a patient named Robert, 54 years old, who came to me with high blood pressure that 3 different medications could not fully control. His fasting glucose was 98, technically normal. His A1C was 5.6, right at the edge but still within range. When we put a continuous glucose monitor on him for 2 weeks, we discovered that his blood sugar was spiking above 180 after nearly every meal and staying elevated for over 2 hours each time. Once we addressed his post-meal glucose spikes through dietary changes, his blood pressure dropped so significantly that we were able to reduce his medication by half within 3 months. His cardiologist was stunned because no one had thought to look at his glucose response after eating. Number 2 is the thickening of the heart muscle itself, a condition called left ventricular hypertrophy. When blood sugar spikes repeatedly cause your blood vessels to stiffen and your blood pressure to rise, your heart responds the way any muscle responds to increased resistance. It gets thicker. At first, this might sound like a good thing, like your heart is getting stronger. But a thicker heart wall actually makes the heart less efficient at pumping blood and less able to relax between beats, which leads to a type of heart failure called diastolic heart failure, or heart failure with preserved ejection fraction. This is one of the fastest growing forms of heart failure in the world, and research published in Circulation in 2020 showed a direct correlation between glucose variability and the development of left ventricular hypertrophy, even in people without diagnosed diabetes. Number 3 is the formation of advanced glycation end products, which scientists call AGEs. When there is excess glucose in the blood, it begins to stick to proteins in a process similar to caramelization. These sugar-coated proteins become rigid, dysfunctional, and inflammatory. In the context of your heart and blood vessels, AGEs make your arterial walls stiff and brittle. They cross-link with collagen, which is the structural protein that gives your blood vessels their flexibility, and essentially turn elastic, responsive arteries into rigid pipes. This process is irreversible. Once collagen is glycated, it cannot be restored to its original state. The only strategy is to slow down the rate at which new AGEs are formed, and the single most powerful way to do that is to prevent sharp blood sugar spikes. A 2017 study in the journal Atherosclerosis found that circulating levels of AGEs were directly proportional to the magnitude and frequency of post-meal glucose spikes, not to average blood sugar levels. This means someone with an A1C of 5.4 who has wild swings after meals could have higher AGE levels than someone with an A1C of 6.0, whose glucose rises slowly and gently. Number 4 is the direct damage to the cardiac conduction system, which is the electrical wiring of your heart. Glucose spikes create fluctuations in electrolyte balance, particularly potassium and magnesium, which are critical for maintaining a steady heart rhythm. When these electrolytes shift rapidly in response to insulin surges, it can create electrical instability in the heart that manifests as palpitations, skipped beats, or in more serious cases, arrhythmias like atrial fibrillation. I see this in my practice every single week. Patients come in complaining of heart fluttering or racing after meals, and they have been told it is anxiety or stress. When we dig deeper and look at their glucose patterns, we almost always find aggressive spikes that are destabilizing their cardiac rhythm. A large-scale study from South Korea published in 2021 in the European Journal of Preventive Cardiology followed over 9 million adults and found that glucose variability was independently associated with a higher risk of developing atrial fibrillation, regardless of whether the person had diabetes. Number 5 is the acceleration of coronary artery plaque formation. I touched on how inflammation from glucose spikes creates the initial damage to the vessel wall, but the process goes further. When the endothelium is damaged, small LDL cholesterol particles can penetrate the vessel wall and become trapped underneath. Once trapped, they become oxidized by the same free radicals generated during glucose spikes. And oxidized LDL is what truly drives plaque growth. This is why people with perfectly normal cholesterol levels still have heart attacks. It is not just about how much cholesterol is in your blood. It is about whether your blood sugar spikes are creating the conditions for that cholesterol to become dangerous. Research published in the New England Journal of Medicine has shown that controlling glucose variability reduced markers of arterial inflammation by up to 36% in patients who were already on statin therapy. In other words, even if you are taking cholesterol medication, uncontrolled blood sugar spikes are still fueling the fire. Number 6 is the impact on your autonomic nervous system, specifically the balance between your sympathetic and parasympathetic branches. Sharp glucose spikes trigger a strong sympathetic response, which is your fight-or-flight system. This means your heart rate increases, your blood vessels constrict, and your body releases stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. If this happens occasionally, your body recovers. But if it happens multiple times a day because your diet is causing repeated glucose surges, you end up in a state of chronic sympathetic dominance. This leads to elevated resting heart rate, reduced heart rate variability, and increased cardiac workload, all of which are independent risk factors for sudden cardiac events. A fascinating study from Stanford University published in 2023 using continuous glucose monitors and wearable heart sensors demonstrated that within 15 minutes of a glucose spike exceeding 140 milligrams per deciliter, there was a measurable increase in heart rate and a corresponding decrease in heart rate variability that lasted for up to 4 hours after the spike resolved. That means a single spike at lunch can keep your heart in a stress state all the way through the afternoon. Number 7 is the damage to the microvasculature of the heart itself. We talk a lot about the large coronary arteries because those are the ones that get blocked and cause the dramatic heart attacks you see on television. But your heart also depends on a vast network of tiny blood vessels called the microvasculature that deliver oxygen and nutrients directly to the heart muscle cells. These tiny vessels are even more sensitive to glucose damage than the large arteries because they lack the protective smooth muscle layer that larger vessels have. When glucose spikes damage the microvasculature, the heart muscle does not get adequate oxygen, which leads to a condition called microvascular angina. People with this condition experience chest pain, shortness of breath, and fatigue, but their angiograms come back normal because the large vessels look fine. It is the tiny vessels that are suffering, and the damage is being driven by repeated glucose spikes that no one is monitoring. Now that you understand the 7 mechanisms by which blood sugar spikes attack your heart, I need to warn you about the foods and habits that are silently accelerating this damage because some of them will genuinely shock you. The first hidden danger is fruit juice, and I know this sounds controversial. We have been told our entire lives that fruit juice is healthy, that it is natural, that it is packed with vitamins. But here is what the marketing does not tell you. A single glass of orange juice contains roughly 26 grams of sugar, with virtually no fiber to slow its absorption. When that sugar hits your bloodstream, it spikes your glucose just as aggressively as a can of soda. In fact, a study from Harvard published in the British Medical Journal found that regular fruit juice consumption was associated with a higher risk of type 2 diabetes than eating whole fruit, and the glucose response curves between juice and cola were nearly identical. Your endothelium does not care whether the sugar came from an organic orange or a candy bar. The damage is the same. The second hidden danger is white rice, particularly when eaten in large portions as a main course. Rice has a glycemic index that can exceed 70, which puts it in the same category as white bread. In Asian populations where rice is a dietary staple, researchers have found higher rates of type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular disease directly linked to rice consumption, even when overall calorie intake is controlled. A meta-analysis published in the British Medical Journal in 2012 analyzed data from over 350,000 participants and found that each additional daily serving of white rice was associated with an 11% increase in diabetes risk. The glucose spike from a large bowl of plain white rice can easily reach 180 or even 200 milligrams per deciliter, which is well into the range where significant endothelial damage occurs. The third hidden danger is the practice of eating carbohydrates first in a meal. Most people sit down and immediately reach for the bread, the rice, or the pasta before touching their protein or vegetables. This is one of the most damaging dietary habits you can have because eating carbohydrates on an empty stomach with nothing to slow their digestion causes the fastest and highest glucose spikes. A study published in Diabetes Care in 2015 showed that simply changing the order in which you eat your food, specifically eating vegetables and protein before carbohydrates, reduced post-meal glucose spikes by up to 73%. That is not a typo. 73%. The food is exactly the same. The calories are exactly the same. But the order in which it enters your stomach changes everything about how it affects your blood sugar and therefore your heart. Now let me give you the practical steps you can start implementing today to protect your heart from glucose spikes, because I refuse to leave you with fear. I want to leave you with power. Action number 1 is to restructure the order of your meals. From today forward, eat your vegetables first, then your protein and healthy fats, and save your carbohydrates for last. This single habit can reduce your glucose spikes by more than half, without changing anything else about your diet. It works because the fiber from vegetables and the fat and protein create a physical barrier in your stomach that slows the rate at which glucose enters your bloodstream. Action number 2 is to take a 10-minute walk after your largest meal of the day. Skeletal muscle is the biggest consumer of glucose in your body, and when you activate your muscles shortly after eating, they pull glucose directly from your bloodstream without even requiring insulin. Research published in Diabetologia showed that a brief walk after meals reduced post-meal glucose peaks by 22% compared to sitting. That is a 22% reduction in damage to your endothelium, your arteries, and your heart, all from 10 minutes of easy movement. Action number 3 is to add a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar diluted in water before your main meals. The acetic acid in vinegar has been shown in multiple clinical studies to slow gastric emptying and improve insulin sensitivity, resulting in lower and more gradual glucose rises after eating. A study from Arizona State University found that vinegar consumption before a high-carbohydrate meal reduced the post-meal glucose spike by 34%. Dilute it in a full glass of water and drink it about 15 minutes before eating for the best effect. Action number 4 is to replace any fruit juice you currently drink with whole fruit. The fiber in whole fruit dramatically slows sugar absorption and prevents the sharp spikes that damage your cardiovascular system. An apple contains roughly the same amount of sugar as a glass of apple juice, but the fiber matrix in the whole fruit means the sugar is released slowly over 1 to 2 hours rather than flooding your bloodstream all at once. This simple swap removes one of the most common daily sources of hidden glucose spikes. Action number 5 is to consider monitoring your glucose response with a continuous glucose monitor for at least 2 weeks, even if you are not diabetic. This is the single most eye-opening thing you can do for your health because it shows you in real time exactly how your body responds to specific foods. Many people discover that foods they believed were healthy, like certain cereals, smoothies, or rice dishes, are causing massive spikes they never knew about. Knowledge is protection, and a CGM gives you knowledge you cannot get any other way. Now I want to hear from you. Based on everything you have learned today, I want you to tell me in the comments which one of these 5 actions you are going to start with this week. Be specific. Tell me what you are going to change because writing it down makes it real. And if there is someone in your life who has been dealing with heart palpitations after meals, unexplained high blood pressure, or rising blood sugar numbers, please share this video with them directly. Not just a like. Actually send it to them. Text it. Email it. You might be giving them information their own doctor has never shared with them, and that could literally change the course of their health. My name is Dr. Nathan Carter, and I make these videos because I believe you deserve to know how your body works before things go wrong, not after. I care about your health, genuinely and deeply, and I will keep showing up here with the information that matters most. If you are new here, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a video. And please remember, everything I shared today is for educational purposes. It is designed to inform and empower you, but it does not replace a personal relationship with your own physician. If you are concerned about your blood sugar or your heart health, please work with a qualified healthcare provider who can evaluate your individual situation. Take care of your heart. It is the only one you have, and it is counting on you to protect it.